version 2 on the left, version 1 on the right. So of course, as this is a third or fourth take, video is off to the side, and it actually gets moved way further to the side later in the video. Here's a couple pads that don't have any solder on there. And of course there's a bunch of bridging going on there, which you can't see very close up. Seen a couple videos with the through holes there on the left and to the right. Two of them are empty. I actually put on the wrong connector, found out it was wrong, then pulled it back out, and it left those holes. I've seen a couple of videos that have the solder still left in them, which seems to be pretty beneficial actually, which I find out a little bit later. One, getting the holes empty, completely empty, is pretty difficult. I'm sure there's probably a couple technicians that have tricks and wick that can pull it out easier than I can, but definitely for any novice, getting those holes completely clear is really difficult. And I'm pretty sure those two holes that are actually empty would not fit the connector through anyways. They have to be very clear to get any connector to slip through. So yeah, FYI, leave the solder in. I'm sure there's a couple technicians that might say, oh, well, you need to put new solder in there. You can still do that. Fill them back up, try to empty them out, fill them back up. So yes, put new solder in there if you wanted to have a good connection. Yeah, I need a better stand. That thing's wobbling left and right. Oh, here I actually got solder on that, I'm not sure what you'd want to call it there with all the holes there. It's kind of a heat sink, maybe. And spreading out solder. Really not knowing what to do with that solder. Ended up getting the wick and just kind of spreading it out and making it even. Making sure there's no peaks. That portion right there would actually be touching metal on the underneath the connector. So after heat's being applied, it would actually probably solder itself, which wouldn't be a bad thing. It allows heat to transfer in. So this being version 2, I'm assuming the square chip above this connector is probably the HDMI encoder. I know in version 1 that encoder is on the other side underneath the heat shield. Definitely version 2 is a lot different. This is what, A1215 or 1215A compared to 1115A. That's CUH-11. CUH-1215A is what I have in front of me here. But that HDMI encoder, from what I hear, fails. I'm assuming that's the chip. It's about the same size. I did not look that up on any schematic or figure out what that is, but I'm assuming. And I think anybody else that looks at these boards would be able to see those chips and just be able to, okay, yeah, that's kind of identify it a lot easier. Alright, so spread it out. That extra solder that just would not go away. Time for a connector. And as you'll see, I had a couple techniques to get that connector in there. Since it doesn't slip through all the way because of the solder holes actually having solder in them, it's leaning. The previous connector, actually the wrong connector, had a little divot in the metal that I could actually get tweezers and hold it there and hold it in place. There seems to be no divot on this connector, so I couldn't use the same technique to hold it down. One other technique that I end up actually accidentally doing, and I think there's a couple other technicians that explain preheating the board. Definitely you can preheat the board with a heater pad made for that function, which might be beneficial, or of course the other method of just spreading out the heat using the heat gun to heat up the surrounding areas, so preheating. So I kind of accidentally do that. I do know of that technique, and I'm going to try to perfect that a little bit later on, but I never really adjust the heat, so I do have the heat a certain temp that I think I had already tried and failed, so it had stayed at the same heat. On mine it was decently high, but not the highest, and the airflow was, I don't know, 2/10 of the way, so pretty low. There's three little SMDs there that had risk, or actually what I was really scared of actually just blowing off the board, hence the reason the low airflow, which I think was the perfect speed to not blow anything off the board. But they did also realize that after getting this connector in there, it did kind of block the airflow a lot. So much that I was actually very confident in taking this connector in and out multiple times. But one of the other techniques of kind of preheating the board, I did find out I could actually go in circles, heat up the board to pretty high temp, and then zero in on the through holes without the connector in place there. And within about a half a second to 1 second, put the connector in with my fingers, and it semi-solder in and push through the hole. That gives me enough connection to have it propped up in the holes, and then finally get the heat preheated the second time. It's already warm a little bit, but preheat and go in circles a little bit, and then finally go zero in a second time after it was almost in all the way the first time. So we'll see that in just a moment. Right now, I'm actually looking at this under a microscope. I'm actually able to see the details of that solder kind of go shiny, so I know that it's actually molten. So actually I educated myself a lot actually on time. Like, okay, it's molten. Oh, no, it's not molten. Now it is. And be able to get that connector in. I'm pretty sure, pretty close to actually getting that connector in. And to hold the connector, I ended up getting it on the other side of the tweezers, using the flat area to just go in the center, to give me enough room to go on the right side, the left side of the connector. Okay, so I knocked the board way off out of the camera there. You can't see anything. Okay. Pretty sure warming it up, preheating it. So as I was explaining a little bit before, I was able to preheat it just enough to actually push it in there with my fingers and have it stick. Now that it's stuck, already preheated there, it's able to zero in and just push it in. So now it's actually all the way in. Now I want to actually make sure that it's really flush. So I'm applying that heat a second and third time. Get in there, pushing down with the other side of the tweezers, giving a little heat to the pins, not enough to blow any connectors off. S and D, small parts. Pretty much done. Of course, the last part is to use a soldering iron to fill in those holes and make a true, real connection. Pretty sure some of the other videos from other people will use hot air to get it in there. All done. Small soldering iron. Almost perfect.